From the very first whistle, Arsenal made their intentions absolutely clear. We are not here to play football. We are here to defend, stay organized, and make your life as difficult as possible. And they committed to that idea completely. Arsenal set up in a 4-4-2 mid-block, meaning they weren't sitting deep on their own goal line, but they weren't pressing high either. They were sitting in the middle third, compact, disciplined, and incredibly hard to break down. Odegaard and Havertz were the first line of contact at the top of that block. They weren't hunting the ball aggressively. They were simply there to guide PSG in certain directions and make the first pass uncomfortable. Now PSG's response to this was smart. As they often do, they tucked Mendes deeper into the back three during build-up. And the reason this works is simple. Against a front two, having a spare man deep gives you a guaranteed escape route. If any pressure comes, you've always got someone free to play out. It's a safety valve that makes pressing from the front very difficult and very risky.
Here's where it gets really interesting. And this is something that was happening consistently throughout the entire match. PSG's front three, Dembélé, Doué, and Kvaratskhelia, were not staying in fixed wide positions. They were constantly rotating and shifting together to deliberately overload specific areas of the pitch. And the most notable movement was Doué. Because Arsenal were sitting in that 4-4-2 shape, the left side of their defense, Saka and Mosquera, often had a 2v1 advantage against PSG's right side. PSG's answer to this was to send Doué across from the right wing to join the left side, instantly turning that 2v1 into a 2v2 and eliminating Arsenal's numerical advantage in that area. But PSG didn't just leave the right side exposed when Doué moved. Either Hakimi or Dembélé would shift across to hold the width on the right. And here's the really clever bit. Whenever Dembélé moved wide to maintain that width, Fabián Ruiz would slide into the central position to fill the space Dembélé vacated. So PSG were never losing their central presence. They were constantly maintaining a threat in the middle, even while overloading wide areas. It was a really well-coordinated system of movements that required all three attackers and the midfield to be on the same page at all times.
Arsenal weren't just standing there watching this happen, they had an active response. Whenever PSG's front three overloaded the left side, Arsenal would pull either Rice or Odegaard across to provide extra cover and back up the press. And in isolation, that's a reasonable solution. You match their numbers and protect the danger area. But here's the problem. The moment Rice or Odegaard shifted across to the left, they left a gap in Arsenal's central midfield. And who was sitting in that gap almost every single time? Fabián Ruiz. PSG consistently had a spare man centrally because of this, and that's not a coincidence. It was a direct result of how their front three movement was designed to pull Arsenal's midfield out of position. Now PSG did try to exploit this. They would often look to switch the play quickly and find Hakimi on the right after dragging Arsenal across to the left. And in theory, that should have caused real problems. But Arsenal's defensive shape and individual discipline held firm. Even when they were being moved around and stretched, they recovered quickly and made it extremely difficult for PSG to turn those overloads into genuine chances. Which tells you a lot about how well drilled this Arsenal defensive unit was. One player who deserves a huge amount of credit for how Arsenal's defensive structure held together is Saka. Because naturally, Saka is an attacker. His instinct is to get forward, get on the ball, and create. But throughout this match, he completely suppressed those instincts for the good of the team. Whenever PSG played progressive passes wide, Saka was the first man sprinting back. He was ensuring that the PSG winger had no clean lane to cut inside, always making sure there were two Arsenal bodies waiting. And when Doué's movement threatened to create that 2v2 on Arsenal's right, Saka stayed disciplined, held his position, and refused to be dragged out of shape. For a player of his attacking quality to perform like that in a Champions League final is a real testament to Arteta's tactical organization and Saka's professionalism. The first half belonged to Arsenal, organized, disciplined, protecting their lead, and making PSG work incredibly hard for very little. But Enrique made some important changes at halftime that gradually shifted the momentum. The biggest change was in how his midfielders were positioned at the start of attacks. In the first half, they were spread across the pitch in relatively default positions, fine for progression in theory, but too separated to create real overloads. In the second half, Enrique had two or sometimes all three midfielders starting wide on the same side of the pitch. This was designed to drag Arsenal across horizontally, creating an imbalance in their defensive shape before the ball even moved into dangerous areas. And the knock-on effect of this was significant. In the first half, whenever Saka got pulled higher, Havertz would drop back to cover the space behind him. But in the second half, Arteta adjusted by having Rice shift across to maintain defensive solidity higher up instead. The problem with this is that it meant Trossard on the left was now having to tuck in more than before. And once Trossard tucked in, PSG's switches of play became far more effective, particularly when a half-space player could pin the fullback and give the wide man a running start at a 1-versus-1. On top of that, Neves and Ruiz started taking up deeper, wider split positions. This forced Arsenal's wide players to step up and engage them whenever they had the ball. And the moment Saka or Trossard stepped up to press, space opened up behind them. It was a trap, and Arsenal increasingly fell into it as the second half went on. When PSG equalized, and it's worth noting that it took a penalty for them to do so, which tells its own story, Arsenal came out of their defensive shape for the first time and tried to press more aggressively. And they immediately looked vulnerable doing it. The organization that had defined their first-half performance was gone. Anytime the pivots didn't track back quickly enough to support the press, PSG were walking into the final third with very little resistance. It showed just how much Arsenal's game plan depended on that defensive structure staying intact. Once it was disrupted, they looked like a completely different team. Arsenal's goal is a really interesting moment, because it came against the run of play in terms of possession, but made complete sense tactically. PSG pressed aggressively whenever Arsenal had the ball, with Dembele pressing from the outside in, and Hakimi backing that up to form a compact shape higher up. Trossard drifted inside, and Havertz dropped deeper, and because Pacho was man-oriented on Havertz, and Mendes was tight on Trossard, there were gaps opening up in PSG's defensive structure. In the goal specifically, Pacho got dragged deep following Havertz's run. Mendes tracked Trossard wide. PSG seemed to have it covered, but an unlucky ricochet combined with Pacho still being high from the press gave Havertz just enough space to attack and finish. One moment of chaos in an otherwise controlled PSG defensive performance, and Arsenal made them pay. So who actually won this tactical battle? Honestly, it depends on what you value in football. If you value structure, organization, and defensive discipline, Arsenal were the better team. They were compact, well-drilled, incredibly hard to break down, and PSG needed a penalty just to draw level. That tells you everything about how effective Arsenal's system was on the night. But if you value individual quality, creativity, and attacking intent, PSG were clearly the superior side. They had better players, more dangerous attackers, and ultimately found a way to win. Their front three movement and coordinated overloads were a constant problem that Arsenal had to work incredibly hard to contain. The truth is, both things are true at the same time. Arsenal brought a nearly perfect defensive structure to the biggest game of their season. PSG brought world-class individual talent, and on the night, the individuals just edged it. And before you go, this will actually be my last video with an AI voice. From next week Saturday, I will be posting with my face and my own voice. A big step for the channel, and I am really excited about it. I hope you stick around for that. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week.